Welcome back to the Game Informer Show. This is Ben. I'm Ben. I'm still here. I'm joined by three very, very special guests today. Brian Horton, the creative director on Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales. How's it going?
Hey, doing good.
Yeah, great. We also have Cameron Christian, the game director.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. And then the art director, Jason Hickey. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, that's right. How are you?
Yeah, great. Welcome. Thanks for being on the show, guys. Really appreciate it. We obviously have talked to you guys a couple times throughout the process of making the game, but now the game's out. Congrats. It's getting pretty good reception. You guys feeling pretty good with yourselves?
Oh, yeah. Feeling good.
The team killed it. I just,
really
it was a tough year and we persevered and we did it.
So Brian and Christian, you guys are creative director, game director. How do you guys delineate those different duties? Like, what's the difference between game and creative, I guess?
Cam does all the super important stuff.
No. No, I mean, I think, Horton, focuses on characters and story and all that stuff, and I focus on interaction, but really we focus on both. There's a lot of crossover, right? Like, we're both playing the game a million times. We both probably played this game, like 500 times, and we really just share on that responsibility. But, the projects now are gigantic, so it's nice to make sure there's other eyes that are kind of focusing on certain aspects.
Sure. Well, I'd love to jump back to, I assume it's maybe close to the release of the 2018 game, when you guys first started to talk about, Miles Morales, should he have his own game? Did you guys know that you wanted to make a game for him like early on? Were you thinking DLC even, or was it always its own game?
Brian Intar and I had some conversations very early, or actually before we shipped Marvel Spider-Man, about the story that we started in that game. We saw Miles Morales, really it's his year one story starts in Marvel Spider-Man, but we knew we needed a standalone game to complete his arc and really see Miles' coming of age story to become his own hero. So that was something we talked about early on, and that was always the goal, is giving Miles his own game to shine.
Were you guys worried about delivering and like meeting the same level that Marvel Spider-Man delivered? Because that game was pretty high quality bar, and it feels like you guys had kind of a shorter time limit to deliver in.
Well, here's the thing: we all worked on Marvel Spider-Man, so we understood the DNA of what made that game so special. A lot of us were key contributors. Like Jason was working on environments. Cam came up with the team much of the combat setup and systems for that. So we kind of understood intuitively what was magical about Spider-Man. Our goal was, how are we going to make Miles stand apart from the first game? And that's where we started at the very beginning and made sure that was going to be the primary focus. And I think we were confident that we were able to find the magic of Miles because we were so keen on him as a character and his specific abilities.
Sure. When you guys looked at that 2018 game, were there any weak spots or areas where you're like, I think we can turn it up a notch here, and I think this is a place where with the Miles Morales game we can kind of like push things to 11 a little bit? What were those?
Well, I don't know if I would call it weak spots. There's places that we wanted to evolve, places we wanted to take it that we didn't quite have time to take it in 2018. And, like, again, a great example of that is like how we continue to evolve Miles combat, right? And really that's based on the foundation of successful Spider-Man combat, but we were always looking at ways to keep pushing it forward and evolving it, and Miles really gave us that opportunity.
Yeah, from an art point of view as well. I mean, there was a lot of great stuff in 2018, and luckily for us, Spider-Man did really well, which meant that a lot of the ideas that we were, too ambitious for the first game, we were able to go, oh great, now we can actually try these things. But it was a constant evolution. Like just let's say environments. One of the things we looked at was, well, how can we make new environments that are different to the 2018 Spider-Man, and will give the players a new way of feeling the space. So One of them is the Oscorp Science Center, which, we added a lot more curves. We made a very large and I think really successful storytelling element to that, plus also mixing in combat. So we were really pushing where we were in 2018. That's just one example. I think in every aspect of the game, we were trying to go, okay, well, what can we evolve? Not so much like that was terrible, because we appreciate that, like, we all worked on it. And I love 2018 Spider-Man. It was a great game to play, a great team to work on. And it's like, okay, well, what do fans want now? Where can we push the envelope, especially going into next generation?
And I'd say too, our engagement with the open world, Cam, we really ratcheted that up with the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man app. Yeah. So just having a new way to interface with that open world content, to look at our quests and go, hey, let's tell a deeper story. Let's let that quest story evolve over multiple quests. So really, I look at it as an iteration on some of the foundation ingredients that we created, but we try to focus and make sure that those elements, all of them told story, including environment, including combat, including our open world, to ensure that everything was pointing back to how Miles was going to become this hero, and how the focus or the heart of this story being in Harlem, how he learned what he was going to be fighting for. So everything sort of swirled around those core pillars to ensure that we were building upon that premise.
Sure. When you guys were still early on the project, Into the Spider-Verse came out, the movie, which was an awesome movie. I'm sure you agree, but it kind of like helped shape the general cultural understanding of who Miles was. And your Miles was a bit different, just based on the 2018 version. So like, were there any influences there where you're like, oh, that's a good point, we should maybe shape that? Or were you pretty like focused in on like what you guys were doing?
Well, I'll say we were starting and had a lot of our story foundation before that movie came out. So it was heartening for us. There was such a positive, we were all blown away. I mean, just straight up. When you watch the movie, from art direction to music to animation style, it was revolutionary product. But what heartened us was, here was a take on Miles that was going to be different than our take. Like, he was younger. It was really his year one story, when ours was a year two story. So we got to see a more mature Miles. But what we did love, and what I think we have our own take on, is the feeling of his connection to culture. By putting it into East Harlem, you're seeing so much attention to detail. And Jason, I'd love for you to talk about that character of Harlem and what we put into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just want to say that Into the Spider-Verse was a great inspiration for. There's some areas where I'm like, oh, that's an actual potential that we can aim for. It's not necessarily the same, but especially like say the movement or how a character was portrayed was really inspiring. And we had an opportunity to meet some of the people who worked on it and share ideas at one point, which was really rewarding. But yeah, I think sort of building on the last two questions, we were looking at the most successful stuff as well from a fan point of view, as well as internally. Like Black Cat, for example, in the first game had a really nice arc that had a clear beginning, middle, and end. And we wanted to make sure that all of our content, especially the quest, had that feeling of being in the world and have a beginning, middle, and end. So an early initiative was to make sure that we had quests that had meaning. And a lot of that were the characters, and then they lived in the character, which is East Harlem, Spanish Harlem area. But even before all that, the gameplay side of things, Miles Morales' character is all about being, he's a real identifiable, diverse person from New York, and he lives in it. Originally, he's in Brooklyn. And what we wanted to do was present a different set for that. And his family background allowed us, or at least the way we went with it, allowed us to put him into East Harlem. And actually, in the first game, it was something that we again, was sort of not a scope issue, but like a prioritization issue of telling very detailed stories in some of the sort of neighborhoods. And this is one of the areas where we wanted to say, hey, look, let's take this area and really like push it, so that every street detail, every piece of audio the way the weather is, the way the lighting is, the way that the pedestrians react, are telling the story of this rich cultural location. We did a lot of research into that, like a lot. And luckily we have some New Yorkers on the team, and we have people with Puerto Rican background. We have Puerto Rican friends of people who work in the studio who could help us with that stuff. Horton,
and you sound like you're from New York yourself.
Oh yeah, I'm from.
Can you hear that? Can you hear that accent?
Yeah,
Thick New York accent.
Yeah, Dublin, New York. But Brian, you actually went and took a lot of pictures for us. When went on vacation there. We just did a lot of research because in order for the character to fall in love with the location, we wanted the players to be in love with the location as well.
I'm curious about that too. I mean, you guys made good use of Harlem, and it's a cool spot in the game, and it makes sense. Was there ever thought to like, hey, let's expand this and add more boroughs? Is that just too large of a technical issue? Was there ever thought to that?
I think our goal for this product from the beginning was focus. How do we boil everything down to an essence so we ensure that it was telling a very tight story? But one thing that's wonderful about us being in Harlem is that obviously Harlem was represented in the city in the first game, but not to this degree of detail, not to this degree of cultural correctness. So when Miles moves to Harlem, what's so great about that is he doesn't know Harlem very well. Most of our players didn't know Harlem very well. So as Miles is sort of uncovering it and figuring out where the corner bodega was, we were figuring out where the corner bodega was. And we became more familiar with it as a player as Miles was. And I think, I always often call it the player protagonist parody. Like you feel you're in Miles' shoes as you go through this journey. That was our primary focus, was not more in a bigger standpoint. It's focus and depth. So depth was much more of our goal, not breadth.
Sure. I want to jump back to Into the Spider-Verse again, just real quick, because you guys actually took the suit from Into the Spider-Verse and put it in the game, which is super awesome. I remember watching that video when it debuted and playing with it in the game and just like swinging around for probably half an hour. Just, it's not that it's the suit obviously visually, but then you added that visual filter on it, which makes it look like it's an animated thing. What kind of like technical wizardry are you guys doing? Like, was that super hard to pull off? Like, what hoops did you have to jump through?
None of us did anything other than say, that's awesome.
Let's do that.
I'll just say that there are wizards at our studio. And Cam, who is our wizard that worked on the tubes?
I think Chris Burrell, right? He's part of the tech art team.
Hey, Jay, they worked on it.
Oh, yeah.
On the shader stuff.
Yeah.
And then there was Animation Wizards. Who did the 4-frame stuff. And then there was also Animation Wizards who were like Danny, who was helping visualize how the kind of
onomatopoeia cards work.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the on-twos aesthetic, that is a tech art feature. Like their animators weren't reanimating our stuff. Yeah. We had to come up with a tech solution so we could apply this filter to the whole game on any suit. So Tech 3000 going on there to try to figure out the amazing Into the Spider-Verse aesthetic. And what's cool is, as Jason alluded to, we actually had conversations in a relationship with the crew that made that film. And when they saw it and they, we sort of got their blessing, they're like, oh my gosh, that looks so much like the work we do. And you've got to talk about James, right? I mean, James's animation was so fantastic. As soon as you apply that effect to it and you have that suit, the amazing shaders, it really starts to feel like that film. So kudos to the team. They keep pushing. Like our team just is always trying to find that extra little thing that we never planned for. It's not like Cam or Jason or I said, hey, let's do this. The team said, wouldn't it be cool if?
Yeah.
And
yeah, exactly. Even the on twos thing, as we call it, like we knew we were going to have a suit. We got the suit, and once people at our studio saw their suit, they started gears turning. Oh, well, we have the suit. We got to do the on twos, and then we got to do the burst card stuff. That like does the cool graphic. And what's awesome, like Horton was saying, the people over at working on Spider-Verse super into it too. Like they gave us a card sheet of the bursts from the movie, right? Like that's how into it. And we utilized a bunch of those. So it's just awesome back and forth.
And of course, they featured the 2018 suit in the film. So there's definitely influences going both ways. And that was like, I actually didn't know when I went to see the film. I was like, oh, that's our suit. So it's strangely collaborative. Which is
That's cool. Was there anything else that the team was working on and then surprised you guys with? You're like, what? I didn't know this was going to be the game.
Yeah, I'll just say Spider-Man the cat.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
it's not like any one of us said we should have a Spider-Man the cat in the game. That started with an idea for a cat, save the cat mission. Ben Arfman, our lead writer, coming up with a name called Spider-Man the cat in a bodega.
Where did he get that name?
I remember the conversation Ben and I have. Ben's like, Brian, the bodega cat's name is Spider-Man. I'm trying to do my Ben Arfman right now. It's not very good. And I says, really, his name's Spider-Man? He's like, it's Spider-Man. I said, okay. And that's literally all it was. It was just, I said, of course it's Spider-Man. But then, you see an animator putting him in the backpack, and then we made a suit out of it. That's all the team coming together going, I'm gonna one up what you did. I'm gonna find a cooler way to do it. And then Bula finally saying, one of our animators saying, I'm gonna have him jump out of the backpack and scratch a dude in the face, in the finisher. I'm like, you better put that in the game. So that's Insomniac Games.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to have that suit in there too, because I loved messing around with that one. It's a lot of fun suits in this game. So nice work. It's a fun game. Just talk about the gameplay too, and we've talked about this. We did our month of coverage when we did the magazine cover. But I just think it's interesting, just the level that you guys go to make everything look very cinematic, especially when during the action. Can you speak to that, like how you guys work and iterate on the gameplay and make it look so good?
Cam, you want to hit that
Sure,
first?
Yeah, I mean, a big push for us is how do we intertwine responsive, fun, flowing combat and constantly push to hit a certain cinematic level. And I think, we started to tap into that on the original Spider-Man with things like finishers. They really gave you those cinematic moments where they just show off the character, show off these cool moves. And as we stepped into Miles, we wanted to explore how we could get more of that, but more active, and Miles, like Bioelectric Venom attacks, really gave us that opportunity, right? And so we looked at how, because there's a certain amount of charge up for those moves, we actually have a little bit of time to show that in a cinematic way that doesn't feel jarring. And so we really just pushed on all those moves to make sure, hey, as we're setting up the anticipation, as we're getting ready, we're going to show an awesome kind of cinematic viewpoint and then let it go and just be into combat. And there's just a lot of back and forth on what that timing is, what those camera presentations are, just to make sure it still feels cinematic, but flows into combat and doesn't interrupt any of that. And so, yeah, it's a lot of work, but, I think it really paid off for Miles. We're really excited how it turned out.
And I'll add too, there was a big emphasis on that smooth transitions from even the start screen. Like we had a vision from the very beginning. I hit start and game plays, right? So us stepping out of that subway, going into cinematic, flowing seamlessly from cinematic into gameplay. We really try to remove any friction between cinematic moments and these more bespoke kind of the cinematic moments and then the systemic gameplay. So the bridge demo that we showed off, and that was a good showcase of how can we go through some of these more exotic sequences using core gameplay like shooting a web, but present it in the most exciting possible way we could.
Yeah,
sure. As we said earlier, the game's out now. Have you guys been? I'm sure you have been reading reviews furiously, watching people play games on Twitch. Is there anything that you've seen people talk about that has surprised you or impressed you?
Jason, what do you got?
I'm really happy about the response to the idea that representation matters. That's the biggest thing for me. I mean, we made a really fun game with a great story, but at the heart of it, it's about being yourself, right? That's where the tagline, it didn't come out of nowhere. And I think that there's people who are crying and saying this is the first time they've seen myself in a game. And I know it's not all games' responsibility to do that or anything, but that's the thing that really hit me. I knew that some people, well, I hoped that some people would have that feeling and feel more empowered in the world, but to see the amount of it, it's pretty astounding. And yeah, that's what more could you ask for as a game developer to make that positive impact on people?
There's a moment in the game. I think this is the moment is where you unlock like all the Pete challenges and he leads you to a present or something, and it leads you to a Black Lives Matter mural. And I saw that. I was like, oh, that's cool. That's in the game. And then it hit me a minute later. I was like, oh, actually, that's kind of like some people would see that as like kind of political or like, sadly, like kind of like, oh, this is messed up. But I saw it. I was like, oh, that's cool. It's in the game. I don't know if you guys want to speak to that. Like, did you guys feel like that was a bold choice, or what was the story behind putting that in the game?
Well, let me just say the team felt it was extremely important that we reflect the world around us.
Yeah.
So in the first game, you saw pride flags emergently through the world. You just swing through the world, there's pride flags. Well, that's something you'd see in the streets of New York City, but especially in a game like Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales. How could we not have a Black Lives Matter mural in the world? And Jason, you worked very close. I'd love you to tell the story about our team and how our team came up with these murals.
So the important thing to know is the murals graffiti generally in the game are, done by someone like me or a concept artist or, illustrator or something, or a graffiti artist who do it for real on the, in real life somewhere, and we scan it. But for this one, we wanted people who were passionate about it to be able to represent themselves. And the people who did it, so James, again, did one, and Natasha did the main, the big, huge one. And there was another couple of people who were involved. But talking about the actual one that has the words Black Lives Matter on it, so the process was really simple. I got some sketches, saw the sketches. I thought, okay, well, let's give it a shot. And I was thinking maybe I'd have to get a lot in and do some art direction. Sort of in my head, I was like, how are we going to get this done in time? As I am with everything. But the stuff that they came back with, again, these aren't like, I'm not saying they're not artists, but they're not paid to be illustrator artists at the studio. We're making these fantastic murals that were really from the heart. And it was basically take them and put them in the game. There wasn't anything more to it than that. And then we were, trying to find best locations for it, where we could show it off, things like that. But I will say, like, there's two choices you have with something like a Black Lives Matter mural: is you either put it in or you don't, and either one of them can be seen as a political statement. For us, we have two factors. One, maybe as individuals we have certain feelings, but also we are representing New York, and you can't represent New York in 2020 without putting that in the game. It's just it's an omission, in my opinion. Yeah, but it was a really positive thing, and the people who were involved in it, I think, are really proud of their work, and they got to represent their own communities. So it was a really fantastic experience, sort of beginning to end.
That's great. The other thing that hit me, and I was like, I would only have noticed this in 2020, is like when you go and you're swinging by or you're helping out like people, like EMTs or people who work at the hospital, they're all wearing masks. And I'm like, was there ever discussion at the studios like, hey, maybe we should take off the masks, or no, we need to leave the masks on, or everybody should wear a mask? Was that ever a discussion?
I don't think we had a desire to reflect 2020 so specifically that we would have everyone in our Marvel's New York wear a mask. It makes sense for the EMT to wear a mask because in real life, EMTs wear masks. But it does make you think, right? Like when you're going through life today and you see that, it recontextualizes what a mask means. And I'll just say, our goal is both to reflect the world we're in, but also we are an escape a bit from the world we live. I can't tell you how many people have posted online or talked to me anecdotally and saying, oh, I love Christmas in New York. I love walking through the streets and seeing all the holiday decorations. And this year I can't do it, or I wish I could do it. and us providing a little respite from the world that we're in right now, and having that joy of celebrating with your friends and family in a city in this communal way. I think it's something we're all, we all desire. We all are jonesing for that feeling.
Yeah, and you got to remember when we had all this planned and we were working on this, there wasn't any pandemic, so we were always going for the like.
You guys didn't predict that? Couldn't see it coming?
Well, we did predict it in 2018. So that's my second point is, people were wearing masks in 2018, Spider-Man, because of
his name was Spider-Man.
Devil's Breath, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course.
So with Devil's Breath, we didn't want to like have Devil's Breath be still there in our game. And I think there could have been some confusion. Of course, again, at the time, there wasn't a pandemic. So
yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, I want to give our audio listeners, video listeners, just kind of a warning, a spoiler warning here, just in case they want to dip out at this point, because I'm happy to talk about some spoiler stuff, which I think you guys are too. So, if you're listening or watching, just be aware that we might veer into some spoiler stuff. So first question I have, you guys were pretty cagey whenever we brought up the Prowler leading into the game. And it was kind of like, in my book, I was like, there's no way they're not going to have him in there, right? And he is. So first spoiler, do you guys want to speak to your take on that character and how you put him in the game?
I'm going to speak to it first fictionally, but I'd love Cam to talk about it from a mechanics standpoint. Fictionally, there was no way we were not having Prowler in this game, right? If we were huge fans of Brian Michael Bendis and Sarah Pacelli's first run, Prowler was a central part of the arc, and our story was all about family, the people you love. So how could we not have Uncle Aaron in the story? That said, there's a minimum bar you want to achieve when you have a Prowler in the game. We knew that there was a certain amount of expectation for a Prowler in the game. We did want to recontextualize who the Prowler was, and I'll just give this background. In 2018's game, we see Jefferson Davis, Miles' father, die. We made a decision on our Aaron Davis chose to break from his life of crime and go straight to try to rejoin his family. That is a division from the comic book universe or from Into the Spider-Verse. That is our own take on Aaron Davis. So I am most proud of the narrative team's desire to want to push and pull this character, to see his arc be a guy who tries to go straight, puts the suit back on to help his nephew, and then in the meantime, make some bad decisions while in the Prowler suit and with a final redemption. Like, that arc for him is probably something that it's just one of those like kind of special things that is only an Insomniac Games version of this story. So that's my context for the Prowler, and Cam and Jason could talk a little bit more about the specifics on his expression in the game.
Yeah, I mean, mechanically, as like an NPC is someone that you are family with, someone who is trying to look out for Miles. We wanted to express moments of you being with him, of you like, yeah, he's kind of looking out for you, he's keeping an eye out for you. But we knew at some point, that we wanted to shift the tables, and you're going to have to fight him. And that boss fight, turned out to be one of our most fun boss fights, and it's something where we knew we were going to have this boss fight. We kind of knew a couple of his powers, but we weren't exactly sure where it was going to go. And one of our designers, Donald, really started this boss fight out and prototyped it, before we really even knew what we wanted to do, and started playing with this idea of light and dark gameplay. And as we started kind of iterating and playing with it, light and dark gameplay and just capturing that feeling and where those delineations of this is light and this is dark can kind of be hard to see it in game as a player. But we slowly shifted that over to him because he's a high-tech guy. He has all these awesome high-tech abilities. Well, what if we kept that same kind of mindset, but made it a little more clear and use that same invisible technology to kind of mirror Miles' own invisible, natural, biological invisible abilities. And so that really, I think, created for a compelling boss fight of just like, man, I don't know where he is. he all of a sudden shows up. And now, the whole goal of that fight really is to kind of like use your spider sense to be aware of when he comes out of cloak, and then using your venom abilities to short him out so you can really get in on him. And like that fight in general, just how it escalates and its tone and where it's located is really fun to watch just evolve, and watch where it went.
Yeah, I like don't know if it much to add, except like for me, Aaron Davis is such an important part of the story because in a way he represents Miles's father, not as his father, but as another very close link because of their relationship history. Aaron isn't Aaron without Jefferson Davis, really. So it's a constant reminder, and doing the side content, or if you want to call it that, the sort of Prowler and Miles relationship content, it really does bring you closer to the idea of family for the Morales family, really. I think like it's another example of where an individual team member or a group of team started to push something on their own initiative with the idea that we wanted something, and then gave us more to work with than we expected, and then that sort of inspired other people to come and do their own thing. That's a really good example. Also, the spider training, the end of spider training. I'm not sure how spoiler you want to get, but that was another Donald
special.
Special, where he we wanted to have an ending. I think we touched on it earlier. We wanted all of our content, whether it be the main story or the side stories, to have a beginning, middle, and end, based off playing games and seeing all the strengths of the first one. And this one was tougher because you're getting to a point where we're like, we can't really do another boss fight, can we?
Can we?
Cam?
And then Cam, you can tell the story of Donald doing his whatever weekend work, whatever it was he did on his spare time. I don't know what he did. And magic.
Yeah, I mean like Jason was alluding to, those are all Pete challenges, which are already just fun thematically, and having kind of Pete, part of your mentor helping give you challenges. And so, like Jason was saying, we wanted to culminate that. And Donald, being awesome, and Donald, like he was like, oh, what if we took the vulture, and what if we just like made him like a hologram, like he's the final test? What if we had two vultures who fight, right? And it only works because of the like thematics of it, like being holograms, and it just makes sense for the final test. And it's so good. The writing is so
but that's what I'm saying. Then you add Ben's writing on top of that.
And
Yuri's performance of the vulture. It's magical comedy, right? It's like it's like you're doing a skill test, right? Like, okay, this is kind of hard. I got to pay attention, but I'm laughing through the skill test. Yeah. Like I'm cracking up at Yuri's reads as the vulture. It really is charming. But that is the team. That is Insomniac Games. Great ideas come from everywhere. Mm-hmm. These things grow organically. Nowhere in our macro was there a vulture fight, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And the Prowler fight was a tough one to even execute at the level. But it's the tenacity of the team to want to ensure that we were going to do justice to these characters and to each of the pieces of content that made up the Golden Path missions, as well as the optional content.
I have an additional weird thing that happened, which was I originally
I don't know if I want to hear. Yeah, go ahead.
The concept I did for the box that is the Pete's station where you activate the hologram training. When I painted that, I wanted to put some stickers on, so I picked a random sticker of Spidey and a random sticker of Vulture, and I just put them on the concept, and then they ended up in the game.
Oh, that's
and
crazy.
Then later the Vulture came in, and I'm like, people.
That is so cool, Jason. That is so meta. I didn't like talk about how. Now, did Donald say he was influenced by your sticker, or
no? But he maybe. I like
maybe
to think
subconsciously. So. Yeah, you're prophetic. Yeah. Well, cool. I'd love to talk about the Tinkerer as well, and maybe in my book, it feels like your biggest change from the comics is the Tinkerer is now, instead of an old man, is like a young girl and actually a friend of Miles. So can you speak to why you felt those changes were important to the story you guys were telling?
Yeah, we went through the Rogues Gallery, and Miles doesn't have a deep roster like Pete does. But what we did see is a character in the Tinkerer who's one of Spider-Man's oldest villains in the comics. What if we refresh the Tinkerer for a modern day? And we knew we wanted a Worlds Collide story, which is another thing. It's a staple of good Spider-Man stories. So we came up with the idea of Finn Mason, Miles's childhood friend from Brooklyn, who was in many ways much smarter and better than he was, but their lives went in two different directions. Miles went to Brooklyn Visions, and Finn did not. And Finn had this tragedy with her brother dying, and then her skills went a different way, and she was looking for redemption. She was looking for revenge against Roxxon, the company who led to her brother's death. And that then is the genesis of the Tinkerer. And we loved the idea, and we had a lot of conversations, Jason, Cam, and I, about what can make our Tinkerer stand apart. What's going to be the thing that makes our Tinkerer unique? And besides the fact that it was a younger woman, was going to be the tech itself. So Jason and Gavin and a number of people came up with this really cool thing called programmable matter, which transforms this technology, this printed metal, into whatever the mind conjures up. And Jason, you might want to talk a little bit about the design process, about bringing the Underground and the Tinkerer to life visually.
Yeah, I think the main thing, the real difference between the old Tinkerer, and I mean the original character, and our Tinkerer, is that the old Tinkerer sort of is the background, like he influences from the shadows. And our Tinkerer is very much active and alive and dangerous, extremely dangerous. So we wanted to make sure that the player felt her as a real threat, and a big part of that, of course, is all the stuff that Cam worked on in terms of how it plays. But from how it looks was how do we create something that's instantly recognizable, is unique, and also feels dangerous. And I'll honestly say that the process was tricky. We went through a lot of phases.
Yeah.
As there's lots of versions of programmable matter or nanotech or whatever that we've seen before, but it and this isn't a technical thing. It was like, how do we get the right balance between it being dangerous, being recognizable, seeing it from a distance, being able to tell this character is using this weapon, so they're this type of enemy, and to help players strategize effectively to get where we are. But I think the main thing was, from a narrative point of view, was to show how smart the Tinkerer is. So it's something that Miles couldn't do. In a way, I think Horton, I remember us talking about this, is that the thing about Tinkerer is that she is more dangerous. She's better than Spider-Man. She's
smarter. She's stronger.
Yeah. She's the only difference is, when it comes down to it, is that Miles has a bigger heart, and it's his compassion and his willingness to be a hero that sort of ends up being, how it ends, how the game ends,
making him the hero, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Then she has her redemption arc, because that was the other important thing too. She had to grow. She had to have an arc. So she was on this wrong path to get justice for her brother. Then when she sees Miles at the end, in the same way as her brother was about ready to die in front of this reactor, she was not going to let that happen, right? So our story culminates with a fantastic sacrifice for her best friend. And that's when her heart grows to Miles's level. And she has...
It's like the Grinch.
Very much like... I was going there in my brain, and you said it out loud.
Yeah.
You said it out loud.
Sci-fi Grinch. Do you remember when the first previs for that final walk up to the train? I was like in tears. Like we were talking, it was just like basic animation, no lighting, and just sort of clunking up, and it's such an emotional ending.
I love Cam. Back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Talk about the Tinkerer as mechanically, because she is the ultimate fight that we have in the game, and we had a big philosophy on what this boss fight was going to be versus others, as far as mechanically. Can you talk about that?
Definitely. You know, I think for us, you know, the backbone of our technology is the programmable matter. And you really see that reflected in the underground faction, you know, which she was running and supplying tech for. But our philosophy going in is, you know, we want to build up the player's skill level. And so we wanted to make sure when we started that boss fight, you had some ideas of like, hey, there's going to be some similarities you're used to fighting, and you're going to kind of understand how to fight her at first, but then she's going to flip the table on you, right? And so we really wanted to start her building off of like, oh, well, she has the ability she could draw a sword, she could draw the gauntlets, you know, she could do everything that the other faction members can do, plus more. And we really wanted to keep it on the sticks in as core combat as possible. And so, you know, there was a lot of just figuring out, like, how do we take what is going to be the basic underground abilities and take that to the next level, while adding awesome spectacle. And so there's just a lot of back and forth on like what that meant. And, you know, so you start out with her, you know, fighting with her switching between sword and gauntlet, which none of the other characters could do, right? So that's already kind of a twist on it. And then she slowly evolves and she's able to like deploy turrets that like grow and form, start launching like area of effect attacks that kind of like prevent you from being in a certain location, and just starting to kind of layer on these extra little bits. And then we finally build up to like these giant programmable matter buzzsaw attacks that she starts throwing out, really putting Miles, you know, on the back foot, trying to figure out how to kind of manage and weave through all that. And again, talking about cinematic stuff, that was another opportunity for us to really show some cool cinematic, what we call synced dodges. Like when she's throwing out those buzzsaws and you're dodging, you get some really cool cinematic moments while still being fully in control and in gameplay. And so, yeah, that was a big push for us. Is like, how does it feel like all the lessons you've learned on the way can be applied here, but we're still kind of keeping you on your toes and making you think and pushing everything about that character.
Sure.
Yeah. And of course, we had the incredible changing space, right? That was another part of building that character, and how that character's sort of fulfilling her goal by destroying the space, which is Roxxon, while you're fighting her.
Yeah.
And you know, kudos to the VFX and the lighting team, but like, there's so many attacks that looked. At one point, you know, we were talking about spectacle. At one point, we were all like, "Okay, too much spectacle." Like, it was so amazing, but we were like, "I'm just, you know, I'm getting overwhelmed, and it's too difficult." But Brianna and there's the whole VFX team, like,
yeah.
Such an awesome job. They killed it. Yeah.
That's great. You know, you guys have talked a lot about your relationship with Marvel, and it's great, apparently, which kudos to that. Was there any point in the process when you had all your ideas that they were like, maybe let's pull back on that, or that they even like said like, hey, actually, what about this, and made an idea better?
I could definitely say more the latter than the former. Most of what we had presented went through, obviously, discussion. Like, nothing was just, they're partners in the sense that Bill's mantra is take the essence of what's Marvel, like start there and be bold, you know, find ways to push it. And the Tinkerer is just one great example of that. If anything, they would just ask us to continue to deepen the relationship. So we were talking about, we found ways and opportunities to make Rick and the relationship of Rick and Finn deeper. And a lot of that was Marvel feedback. Like, they wanted to see that relationship more, right? So there was a lot of like, we had the ideas all along, but we just kept growing them organically as we went. And that's where Marvel was super impactful, because they always remind us, look, Marvel's all about the character. It's all about these characters that you love, and how can you deepen their humanity and express their what makes them super heroic. So that's the kind of stuff that I think they were instrumental on, is just to constantly push back and find, hey guys, Prowler, this is really what we need from the Prowler. How can we make that deep? Like, they were always great stewards of those characters, and they pushed us in the best possible way to make the game
for
better.
Me, as a sort of a specific, when we were designing the sort of, what do you call it, branding, but the sort of underground graffiti tag in the world. Yep. I started off with something that was kind of meh, and I didn't want to admit it to myself, but I knew it was. And then with Eric was really supportive about like going, okay, what can we try? We can try. And what I felt like it was for whatever reason, I found it was a difficult problem to solve. But without Marvel, without Eric Monticelli to help me, it just wouldn't have happened. And we ended up with something pretty cool.
Yeah.
And there was so many versions of that story. So it isn't all like we suggest something, they're like, yay, it's over. You know, there is that as well. But a lot of it is like, that's great. What can we do now to push it more? You know, and that's the way we are with people like Sony, but you know, who are people who helped us externally. I mean, we're still Sony, but there's other people who can help us drive. So we have a really good partnership with them as well. It's always about taking the thing and making it better, rather than no, that's a terrible idea, we're not doing it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I know we're running tight on time, but are there any final thoughts you guys want to offer out on the game? Anything you want to tease for fans for the next Spider-Man game or anything? You can just tell us whatever. It's fine. It's spoiler time.
Well, I just say keep sending us your feedback, your photo modes, you know, we love seeing your engagement with the worlds that we create. I want to shout out Gil and the UI team. I want to shout out Brianna for the accessibility. If we want as many players to play our game as possible, and accessibility has been deepened. So we would love to hear from every player out there to say, how can we make the experience of playing these games better for you? And that's why I think you'll see we keep growing on things that we establish in one game. They will get more and more, you know, hopefully richer as we go forward.
Yeah, that's great.
I'll say play the whole thing 100% platinum, because there's so much good stuff off that kind of main track. Like,
and buy 2 copies.
Yeah, buy 2 copies. Yeah, push them on a friend, make them play it. Yeah.
I'd say get your PS5.
Yeah.
I'm not even trying. Like, it is literally the best system I've ever played as a consumer. It is such a killer system. And if you don't have a PS5, play Miles on PS4 because it's really, really good. But man, the PS5 elevates the experience.
Yeah, and played on New Game Plus. You know, we did something that we haven't done before. Was we have 3 skills and a bunch of new gadget upgrades that only unlock in New Game Plus. And so definitely play through that in our hardest difficulty mode. You know, if you really want to test, play it on ultimate. Like, you can't slack around on that one. You need to be using invisibility. You need to be using all your venom powers. Like, it really puts Miles to the test.
Yeah, and if Cam says that, you know,
I've seen him die, and I made fun of him. I made all kinds of fun of him when I saw him die in that mode.
I loved our conversations where Cam's like, no, it's too easy, and everybody else is like, this is not too easy. You need to stop playing the game for a while.
You're the hardcore one, huh?
Yeah.
Thanks again, Brian, Cam, and Jason. Really appreciate having you on the show. Yeah, that's Spider-Man Miles Morales. Go check it out. It's an awesome game. And thanks for watching or listening to this episode of the show. We really appreciate it. Please come back next week and we'll have another one for you. Till then, game on.